VikesNow, I am Dustin Baker. We are here on May 7th. We have the schedule release on Thursday night. We might have it a day before. Usually I have access to it on the Wednesday before it releases. If I get it, I will share it on VikingsTerritory.com. And tomorrow, I believe we will talk with the great Josh Fry from Purple PTSD about what he's expecting from the Vikings schedule. But as a little teaser trailer for that, I want to talk about a little bit different topic about some of the best offseason decisions of these Vikings to date. I think we have enough sample to adjudicate them. So what I'd like to do with you guys and gals for the next several minutes is talk about some of the best moves that transpired to set this club up for the future, for the short term and certainly the long term. So if you're new to the show, usually when we have lists like this, we start at the bottom. So number 5 I will reveal, and then when we get to number 1, that is the most important part of the list. So in this here, in 12 minutes or so, when we get to number 1, that is the top offseason decision. So let's jump right into it on this solo trip today. Number 5, and you'll have to work with me on this one a little bit. Let me explain it to you, is retaining Brian Flores. So you might say, he didn't have any nibbles on the open market. Well, keeping him in general and paying him handsomely as he is as a coordinator helped so that, there wasn't too much job seeking on behalf of Flores, looking on the open market. I don't know how much he solicited his availability, but no matter what happened in terms of Flores not getting head coach interviews, not getting an itchy trigger finger to go elsewhere, retaining him was paramount because it used to be on offense during the Zimmer era. We are all too familiar with head coaches having pit stops in Minnesota. Now, usually in the Zimmer era, it was offensive folks getting promoted. Pat Shurmur, Stefanski, Gary Kubiak, I guess, didn't really get promoted. He retired. But there was circumstances where the offense, usually Kirk Cousins, did the thing and, made a coordinator look really good. And, he got his shot. Well, we're used to not having very much continuity, always having to replace the offensive coordinator. Now, with Kevin O'Connell, this is different. It's the other side. It's the defensive coordinator. If a defensive boss man is too good, well, he's probably going to get sniffs on the coaching carousel. And Brian Flores, truth be told, probably deserved that. Didn't this offseason. But because he's paid very handsomely, one of the top paid coordinators in the sport, he stayed put in Minnesota, and this is vital. Because you might recall when Flores got his first real chance at leadership with the Miami Dolphins, when he got there in 2019, head coach, his defense ranked last in the NFL per EPA per play, 32nd in the business. Shitty, not good. Fast forward one season at the end of 2020, he had dragged that Dolphins defense to 7th best in the NFL. He already started improving the Vikings defense when he got to Minneapolis. Ed Donatell's group, per DVOA, ranked 24th in 2022 in that somewhat sweet 13-4 season. So 24th, which is the 9th best in the NFL. Well, in 1 year, Flores brought that from 24th to 11th. So now with some new personnel, which we're going to talk about next, the sky is the limit. There is a reasonable path for the Vikings to be a top 10 defense, especially if they get their cornerback room in a group. The Vikings notoriously ranked 32nd per completion percentage allowed last year. That certainly needs a fix. But keeping Flores for the continuity and, just having him in general makes the Vikings defense formidable. So retaining him, hell or high water, even though he didn't get tremendous attention in the head coaching carousel, was paramount. The Vikings need a little bit of continuity, especially inside this competitive rebuild that they've fancied now for 3 years. That's number 5, keeping Flores in-house. Number 4 is prioritizing defense right away in free agency. You might recall on the first day of legal tampering, I believe it was Monday, March 11th, we kind of saw the writing on the wall that Kirk Cousins was going to tamper and then go to the Falcons. And we weren't sure about Danielle Hunter, but as soon as the free agent window opened, Boom. The Vikings signed Jonathan Greenard from the Texans and Andrew Van Ginkel from the Dolphins. Not long after, Blake Cashman, an off-ball linebacker and Eden Prairie native, which is where I went to high school, he signed on the dotted line too. So this was so important for a couple reasons. A, it set the tone for the offseason and the enterprise. When the Vikings hired Kevin O'Connell in 2022, it was very tempting and even correct to assume, oh, all right, the defensive Zimmer era is done. We are transitioning into offense, baby. That was in living color on display when they drafted Jordan Addison in the 2023 NFL draft. The Vikings needed defensive oomph in that draft, but they said, nope, we're getting richer on offense. They look smart for doing so. But this brand of Vikings will always tend to be offense first because a former quarterback in Kevin O'Connell and disciple of Sean McVay is the skipper. Well, their personnel, their roster building through their actions showed, you know what? Before we even think about adding Sam Darnold as a patch-over quarterback, before we even think about signing a Packers defector in Aaron Jones, we're going to sign Greenard, Van Ginkel, and Cashman. And that, you take what Flores was able to do last year with decent personnel, but not elite by any standards, and then you give him new guys, plus Dallas Turner 6 weeks after those transactions, and now you're cooking with gas. You got Shaquille Griffin signed in free agency. Ivan Pace will probably take another leap. I still really think Mekhi Blackman's going to be something special. So the way that defense was a priority set the tone for how the Vikings want to be balanced. It's not going to be one of those teams that, hey, every game is going to be 40-34. We want to play some defense. We know that's what it takes to win a championship that we haven't won in 63 damn years. So it set the tone, and then it was just needed in terms of an X and O standpoint. If Danielle Hunter was going to leave, you couldn't just wait until the second wave of free agency to get, breadcrumb pass rushers. You needed to hedge the bet, sign Greenard for, a big contract, Van Ginkel to a team friendly, and then unbeknownst to anybody, get Dallas Turner in the draft. So this defense is sneakily has the personnel with Flores in charge to be quite good, and that will be vital as J.J. McCarthy develops whenever that may start. So number 5 is retaining Brian Flores. Number 4 is prioritizing defense above all else right away during free agency week. All right, number 3 is letting Kirk Cousins go, letting him walk to the Atlanta Falcons. Now, there is a really mean twist of irony for Cousins personally. Albert Breer from SI.com posted a piece this week that said, one of the reasons that Cousins skedaddled from the Twin Cities was the Vikings were very open with him, which sounds like a Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell thing, that, hey, we are very likely going to draft a quarterback who's going to sit behind you for a little period, and then he's going to be the guy. And, we know Cousins quite well. One of his things is security. And so he bolted for the Falcons for the lure of $100 million guaranteed, $180 million overall, and no joker sitting behind him that he'd have to worry about until the Falcons surprised absolutely everybody and drafted the oldest quarterback. I think he was the oldest quarterback in this draft class, and Michael Penix Jr. So that's a little twist of irony that Cousins left the team that was going to draft his successor for the team that didn't tell him about it and drafted his old successor. So a little irony there. But I have been weirdly labeled as a Kirk Cousins guy for many years. And I have always said on this show and other spots that I like Kirk Cousins as much as I liked Sam Bradford, Dante Culpepper, Teddy Bridgewater. He was the Vikings quarterback. Now he's not, and therefore he's of no interest to me anymore. I think my reputation for being a pro Kirk guy was because people used to say just false shit about him, like, hey, he's a dink and dunker, or, hey, he's only good in garbage time, and neither one of those things were true at all. Cousins had a fantastic arm. In fact, led the NFL, I think it was from 2016 in 40-yard completions, and still we call him a dink and dunker. But regardless of how you feel about Cousins or how people perceive me feeling about Cousins, it was time to change. 6 seasons, 2 playoff appearances, 1 playoff win. of course, those teams not having wonderful defenses wasn't Cousins' fault, but it doesn't matter. It wasn't working the way that it was going with Cousins as the QB1. Now, if you want to argue that he sucked too much of the salary cap into his own pocketbook, or that he didn't put the team on his back enough to drag them to the NFC Championship and beyond, I don't know if I can subscribe to those talking points, but at the end of the day, it flat out wasn't working. And to re-up with a guy with a bad Achilles, which is a pretty serious injury in sports, who, by the way, got a 4-year, $180 million contract. He probably wanted something similar for the Vikings. Yeah, it could have worked. The Vikings could have been wonderful in 2024 with Cousins again. But because it hadn't worked through 6 seasons, I mean, this wasn't like, hey, we tried it twice. We tried it 6 times. So it was time to let Kirk try his next thing, and that's with the Falcons, with this caveat of Penix Jr., and for the Vikings to get with the times, try the QB on a rookie deal thing, let this regime develop their quarterback, and basically just be done with Cousins because it had grown stale. There was a time, probably midway through the 2021 season, where folks realized that the Zimmer and Spielman era flat out was stale. And that's what happened with the Cousins era. Although he was playing wonderfully when he got hurt at Green Bay, he had probably the game of his life against the 49ers. It was too infrequent that we would have that blunt force consistency. Like, we knew Cousins would show up for October and November and be wonderful. December, decent. Now we have a chance to reset the clock with a great unknown in J.J. McCarthy, and then we will hope, because this franchise is overdue, that we did find somebody like Joe Burrow that could anchor the organization for hopefully a decade, 12 years or something like that. That wasn't going to happen so long as you kept re-upping with Cousins. So it was apropos for him to finally go elsewhere and for the Vikings to get with the times and draft a rookie quarterback. Number 2 is drafting J.J. McCarthy and Dallas Turner in round 1. You'll recall we had, my goodness, how many guests do we have on this show? Probably about 20, asking them for all of their draft predictions. And all of them, and then I believe just the general body politic of Vikings fans, assumed, hey, it's a binary choice between J.J. McCarthy and Drake May. The Vikings are going to end up one of those guys. Book it. That happened. They got J.J. McCarthy. You guys and gals were right. What we didn't know is that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah would get aggressive and get a would-be foundational defensive piece as well. I recall very vividly on draft night, my wife was sitting next to me on the couch, and after they got McCarthy at pick number 10, I was like, shit, they're gonna keep their first rounder and get a player at number 23. And because I had spent so small, limited amount of time thinking about the Vikings actually drafting twice in the first round, it felt like a bunch of goodies that had been dropped in my lap. Hey, they can get Quinion Mitchell or Johnny Newton or Byron Murphy, or trade up a few spots with a pretty handsome trade package, donating to the other team to get Dallas Turner. So the bold initiative by Adofo-Mensah to say, you know what, we got our franchise quarterback for cheaper than we expected. We only had to move up one spot. I didn't have to trade 3 first-rounders and more for Drake May, which I would have still been okay with. Maybe not the more part. I would have been okay with the first round, 3 first-rounders, and then that's it for May. I digress. Because they got McCarthy at a discounted rate, at least per what the NFL machine was saying about how much Drake May would be, they were able to jump back in the hopper for Dallas Turner. So now, if you scouted correctly and you've looked at your roster and said, what do we want to do for the future? Well, we had Kirk Cousins exit stage left. We had Danielle Hunter exit stage left for his Houston Texans. We're going to directly replace them with a quarterback, J.J. McCarthy, when wouldn't you know it, an edge rusher in Dallas Turner. This can be the new Cousins and Hunter, and hopefully even better. So being bold in general about, your path, trading a lot to get both men, has me at number 2 for the top offseason decisions so far. I don't know if anything can trump the, off seasons. If I had to recalibrate these ideas, we probably got what we got, unless there's some summer surprise that we haven't thought about. And then number 1 is a pretty broad talker. It is completing the competitive rebuild. It was time. When Kwesi Adofo-Mensah got to Minneapolis in 2022, he unveiled these two words, competitive rebuild, and it made sense. This diagram had been used by the Chiefs with Alex Smith, Patrick Mahomes. They turned over that roster in a couple seasons. They didn't have to tank. They didn't have to say, you know what, bitches, we're going 4-12 at the time because we want to get a sweet, juicy pick in the top 5. They said, no, we can do both. We can win, we can contend, and then we will scout the best quarterback for our future. We'll draft that son of a gun, and we'll be cooking with gas. That's exactly what they did. That's what good franchise, what sturdy franchises do. Like the Chiefs, the Saints to a degree, the Steelers, they never just give up on a season and say, you know, we are intentionally going 3-13. They say, you know, we are going to live in both worlds. We'll competitively rebuild because that's what we do. And usually it ends up pretty well. Look what the Chiefs are doing. 3 Super Bowls since, 2019? Not bad. So at the beginning of the offseason, at the the after season, I don't want to call it postseason, the after season press conference, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah said this: there are some things we need to be better at, no question. I think what you want to get to is to a point, from a depth standpoint, where you can overcome adversity. Right now in the competitive rebuild, we want to get to a place where there is no rebuild. It's just competitive in a window. And I think we're close to that. It's going to take a big offseason. It's why we're going to be here in Eagan a lot. I think it's important, it's key, and I'm excited for the challenge, end quote. So the most important part there is it's going to take a big offseason. That was required to finish their rendition of the competitive rebuild, and they did it. Now we have to wait and see if J.J. McCarthy, he's the key master. He's the beholder of everything of Vikings football for the next 3 to 4 years. If he's at least, you know, a top 11 quarterback, it will be wildly worth it the way that they have done this. I always say, and I'll continue to say it until we see how good McCarthy is, for me, he needs to be at least as good as Dak Prescott, or hopefully better. On my personal power rankings last year and probably this year, I have, you know, Dak Prescott as one step above the pecking order than Kirk Cousins. Not by much, but certainly a little bit better. Therefore, I want McCarthy to be as good as Prescott and hopefully better, because why would I just want Kirk Cousins all over again? No, I want somebody to be better, and to me, that is Prescott and above. Of course, the holy grail is McCarthy is as good as Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes and those guys. Stay tuned, we shall see. But completing the competitive rebuild this offseason was absolutely necessary because it was time. Almost quietly, the Vikings turned over this roster, getting rid of Adam Thielen, Eric Kendricks, Dalvin Cook, Dalvin Tomlinson, Michael Pierce, like all of these guys that were seasoned veterans, they're gone. And because there was no change at QB1 for the first 2 seasons under Adofo-Mensah, we always said, oh, these guys run it back. That's all these bitches do is run it back and do the same thing. Well, that was not right at all. Cousins was the only real staple along with Danielle Hunter, while the rest of the roster completely turned over. Now, because McCarthy's in the saddle and Cousins is gone, folks are like, hey, it's a new era. Well, it's kind of been that new era in the making for 2 years. This was the crescendo. So in January, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah forecasted it. It's going to take a big offseason, he said, but we want to get to a point where it's only competitive and get rid of this competitive rebuild. Year 3 on the job, it was time to put your thumbprint on everything and complete the competitive rebuild so that you have that window of just competitive or just sheer competition, which means you'll be like the Bills and be in it every year, certainly the Chiefs, maybe even the Bengals if Joe Burrow can be healthy. That's where you want these Vikings to be. Re-signing Cousins or waiting until round blah, blah, blah to draft Spencer Rattler or some shit like that, that would not have been an exclamation point on the competitive rebuild. That would have been, we really like Sam Darnold and we're just going to continue to do this competitive rebuild indefinitely. No, the competitive rebuild was over the moment J.J. McCarthy was drafted, and we just so happened to get a sweet side dish in Dallas Turner. So, from bottom to top, number 5 is retaining Brian Flores. Number 4, prioritizing defense right away in free agency. Number 3 is letting Kirk Cousins walk, ending that era after 6 seasons. Number 2 is drafting McCarthy and Turner in round 1 as, placeholders for this brand new era. And number 1 is A, saying you're going to finish the competitive rebuild, which is what the Vikings general manager said in early January, and then actually doing it with your draft picks, with your free agency, charting a course for the future with a rookie quarterback, with a sweet edge rusher, with a patch-over quarterback in Darnold, and then some pretty awesome offensive weapons in Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, T.J. Hawkinson, in the trenches, Brian O'Neill and Christian Darrisaw. So those, to me, are the top 5 decisions on the whole in the offseason. In the comments, let me know if you disagree, if you agree, what have you. Tomorrow we'll be back, I believe, with Josh Fry to talk about what he's expecting from the Vikings schedule or what he'll be looking for as soon as that thing drops. That's all I got. Skol, baby.